negosyante si US President Donald Trump, kaya may ilang umaasa na magiging masigla ang ekonomiya ng Amerika, gayon din sa mga malapit na bansa rito gaya nga po ng Pilipinas dahil sa malaking impluwensya ng Estados Unidos sa global market. Pero ang iba nangangamba sa unorthodox leadership at mga patakarang posibleng ipatupad ni Trump. Para pag-usapan yan at iba pang issue, kasama po natin ngayong umaga si American Chamber of Commerce Senior Advisor John Forbes. Thank you for joining us and good morning.
Great. It's great to be here, Cheryl. Good morning.
So what was your reaction when you learned that Donald Trump won the presidency?
Well, I think I was a little bit surprised because almost all of the polls at the time, if you recall, were predicting that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton would win. So that was a big surprise. I guess the second surprise is that we really haven't had businessmen as presidents as a rule. And so what we have now is an incoming president who's been very, very successful in business, but has never been in military or civilian public service. So there's a degree of uncertainty that was created with his election last November, and I think that uncertainty has continued until now. We're all looking forward with great anticipation to exactly what he's going to say in his inaugural speech in the next 24 hours.
So when it comes to business, what's the consensus among American business leaders in the country and their local partners?
Well, we have a lot of American business leaders here, and I think you have to divide them roughly into those who do domestic business and those who are located in the Philippines because of the excellent workforce to engage in the export of goods and services. So certainly those that are here for the domestic market to manufacture here, primarily here, or in various types of activities like oil and gas, or we're producing cars for the local market. We don't actually have a company producing cars here anymore. They're going to focus on the growth of the domestic market. And we have companies that have been here 80 years, that long. So except during the Japanese occupation, they have continually expanded. But if you're focused on exporting to the United States, say in the electronic or semiconductor industry, or if you're in the BPO sector, then you have to look at the words that have been coming out from the administration about restricting imports and wondering what is it going to mean. We don't know yet what it means, so we're all watching and waiting.
Yeah. Okay. Part of his economic policies, like the strengthening or nationalizing domestic labor and bringing investments back home, should American business leaders in the country be wary of these policies?
Well, one has to know, how is it going to work? The U.S. is a member of the WTO. I think the U.S. is going to try to use the new administration will try to use the WTO more to fight against restrictions on U.S. exports into certain countries, particularly into China, because you have non-tariff barriers or behind-the-border types of restrictions. And the new head of the USTR, Mr. Robert Lighthizer, has done that for much of his career, particularly for the U.S. steel industry. And also the new Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, has been engaged in the business of reconsolidating bankrupt companies, particularly the steel industry. So there's a concern that China has engaged in unfair trade practices. So we have to watch what is done vis-a-vis China. Also, the automobile industry is one that is I think going to be affected. If you look at the early signs where there's talk about imposing tariffs of up to 30 or 35% on cars made abroad. Most recently there's talk against European cars, but a couple of weeks ago it was against U.S. manufacturers in Mexico, or against and the new USTR worked in the Reagan administration on some restrictions on Japanese automotive imports. Now, the Philippines does not export cars, but it does make parts for cars, which go elsewhere and are exported to the United States. So we have to watch that.
Okay. Well, how is the U.S.-Philippine relations nowadays in terms of trade and business?
Good.
All right.
Now, we had, at the American Chamber and American chambers throughout the Asia Pacific, there are 29 of us that are affiliated in an organization called APCAC. We are always in favor of more trade and freer trade. And in recent years, we've been very supportive of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which actually started in the Bush administration, and then was picked up by Obama and taken to its conclusion of having an actual treaty signed. So we became very concerned when we saw during the U.S. campaign that both parties' candidates were saying they're against the TPP. So
Yes.
now President-elect Trump is saying that he's going to just pull out of it. It was interesting to see the Japanese Prime Minister meeting with the Australian Prime Minister last week down in Canberra, both talk about still going forward with the TPP without the United States. So I think advising or encouraging the Philippines to take a look at the TPP, because they were talking about under the Aquino administration about applying to join once it came into effect. So I think, and Vietnam is talking about making reforms even without a TPP that are good for its domestic economy. The other option is perhaps a bilateral free trade agreement. Those were done in the past, and there was talk very, very early in the Macapagal Arroyo administration about a bilateral Philippine-U.S. free trade or a regional U.S.-ASEAN free trade. So those are things that might come up again, but many countries might want those with the United States that don't have them, and they're complicated and take a while to negotiate. So we would encourage opening up the U.S. market to more Philippine exports, and conversely, the same for U.S. exports coming into the Philippines. It's quite open now, but you can always do more.
And can this happen during Trump's presidency?
We are waiting to see. It's too early to tell.
But
It's a good question. But
based on his the campaign pledges or the policies that he was bragging during his campaign.
Well, he had a program that was put out several months ago of what he would do in the first 100 days. And one of the things is to pass a law called End the Offshoring Act. Now, what's going to be in there?
Yes.
Is that going to affect, well, for example, in this product, which is assembled in China, there are 1 million Chinese making Apple and other products there, and it has components that are made in the Philippines. Right? So if something happens to this product, what's going to happen to the exports of the Philippines? And then what's going to happen to the price of this product if it has to be made in the United States? On the BPO side, where the 70% of the revenues are related to the United States, it's actually hard to get people in those jobs in the United States. So the Philippine workforce is better at call centers, better at a lot of the business processing at a more competitive price. And there are non-American companies that compete, even for the U.S. market. So it's not so simple. You just can't bring jobs back. The other aspect that has to be kept in mind is automation. You know, what the voters for Trump weren't told that those jobs, 85% of those jobs, according to economists, were lost not to offshoring, but to automation and higher productivity.
Okay, you said earlier that there are a lot of uncertainties, but what are you hoping for with this presidency?
Well, I'm hoping, of course, that someone who has been very successful in business will learn from his advisors. And you get many, many advisors. First of all, his inner staff at the White House. He has his cabinet people coming in. And then you have the leadership of his party, the Republican Party, in the House and the Senate, so that they discuss and they carefully consider the options, et cetera. That a lot of people, there was a poll just yesterday in the United States, 70% of the respondents were hoping that he would stop tweeting because foreign policy, domestic policy, the economy is rather complicated and become more presidential. I think we're all hoping for that.
But you think he's the type who would listen to his advisors? Let's hope also for that.
Becoming president of the United States and beginning to realize that it's not the same as putting up resorts and casinos and the like is a very sobering experience.
Mr. Forbes, thank you so much for waking up this early, and thank you for joining us
Good.
this morning.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. American Chamber of Commerce Senior Advisor John Forbes.